And all right, I think we're live, Diane. And look, as I was explaining to you, we're going to kind of record this. Maybe Kevin's going to be able to use it as a show for WYSL. We're hoping that. So we're going to take a break, guys. Some of you have met Diane before. Diane and I are going to dive deep into her history. We're going to talk about her resume. We're going to talk about her passionate goals to improve our reality. And she stands alongside libertarians for their anti-war, anti-violence stances. And we're going to be discussing that tonight. So basically, Diane, when my clock says a minute 15, we're going to go and I'm going to hit the intro and then we're going to go live after that. All right.
Okay.
Well, we're live right now. It's just like technically we're going to be doing a recording for the radio.
I see. Well, I hope we remain alive. That's my goal.
That is a good goal. That is a good goal. It really is.
For the next year or two.
And
now, an hour of clarity for exhausted people of our nation mired in toxic partisanship. Left versus right, us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
Hello and welcome to A Free Solution. It's Tim O'Connor, the Freedom Variant, with a very special guest that deserves a lot of attention. It's my friend Diane Sare. Diane ran against Chuck Schumer for New York State, the U.S. position, the Senate for New York State. She's already, guys, she's dedicated. I am so impressed with her. I'm so impressed with her success. She's already committed to taking on Kirsten Gillibrand in 2024. Am I right about that?
Yes, you are.
So Diane, I think the last time we did a show, we had a great conversation, but I want people to get to know you tonight. Like, I want them to, like, what do you do for a living? How did you get here? Why politics? What's going on? Why are you crazy like this? Like, talk to me about it.
All right. Well, what I do for a living is live off my husband, who works his butt off.
Oh, congratulations. I love that guy already. I got to meet
I mean, I do have sort of a part-time job as a political organizer. Was full-time, but now since I'm running for office, I do that less, and that's fundraising. And then I am a musician by training, so I direct a community chorus, which I founded in 2014. And my husband does all kinds of odd jobs as a contractor. I'll put it that way, because he's also a political organizer. So
does he have a ladder right behind his broadcast studio like I do in mine?
What is a ladder? No.
That kind of contractor or a different kind of contractor?
Actually, he does some of that kind of work, painting actually a lot, and stuff like that, and then driving, and whatever it takes so that we have the flexibility to change the world.
That's wonderful. So you conduct like little musicals or big musicals? Let's talk about that for a second.
Well, I went to New England Conservatory of Music after starting out at Hamilton College, right here in New York, in Clinton, New York. And I studied trombone performance and music education. And in Washington, D.C., I created a children's chorus in a horrific neighborhood where a lady who actually was a squatter, she had been a social worker and she was dealing with drug addicts, and she realized that they weren't taking care of their kids, obviously, right?
Right.
So she created this after school program in an abandoned house where she prepared hot meals, brought in tutors. I mean, she really raised these kids, like 25 kids. She got them off the street. She was super strict, but loving. Yeah. And Yeah, I ran into her program and said, I'd like to work with your kids. I can teach them music. So we created a little chorus there. And these kids, I mean, they had seen things in real life that I haven't seen on television. I mean, unbelievable what their lives were like. So they were survivors and they were smart.
I was a child protective services worker. I don't mean to jump in, but
Go ahead.
I have some experience talking to children that when I first got out of college, I went to work for the Child Protective Unit in Otsego County, and the stories that other CPS workers would tell me, and then the kids that you meet, I have a sense of exactly what compelled you there and how important that work was. So please carry on. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's true. And for people who haven't had that, I mean, one little boy who was so smart. And when you ask him, what do you want to be when you grow up? He says, I hope I have a really nice funeral. I mean,
oh, wow, to be that young and thinking that way.
Yeah, in his case, his brother was shot right in front of him in a bad drug deal. And I mean, it's just that kind of trauma that you're dealing with. And our society is a waste. We throw millions of people on the scrap heap who have enormous talents if we care to develop them and if we had a mission. And I would say that's really part of what drives me, because I think that mankind as a whole has to move forward. And if you're trying to do that, then you value people, you value everyone for what they can bring to bear in human progress. I mean, that's sort of a miracle. We're each unique, right? We each have a unique gift.
Yeah, well, so one of the things, let's just talk about that, like this unique gift and this drive. One of the things that incredibly impressed me with you, okay, was back when things were getting organized and people were deciding what races they were going to run for, right? You reached out to me and we did a live, and then you showed up at the LPNY convention and managed to get an opportunity to speak. And you were like all of the time making the offer to help people achieve their goals. You were always just like, look, we're here for this reason. We want to make things better. We want to do this. Whatever collaborations you guys want to work on, I'm willing to entertain any of them and we can have conversations. And so I was like absolutely blown away by your dedication and guys, no jokes, absolute bravery, like to show up in a room full of libertarians who may agree with some of the things you say, but we may find things that we disagree on, right? Like, and you were there to offer whatever assistance you could. So that was number one thing that impressed me about you. Well, that and just your mobility. I want to talk about a big success that you had that perhaps we as the Libertarian Party didn't quite achieve. And I as an independent, you managed to do what? That is hugely important.
I got on the ballot, and I'm the only one in the state of New York that did it, that got the 45,000 plus valid signatures. And I submitted about 66,000 signatures. I actually wanted to do more, but it was, I mean, it's very tough. And it was volunteer. I mean, some people who gave up work, I tried to compensate a little bit. We covered people's expenses, and it was outrageously expensive. I know Larry Sharp and people talked about it. I think my campaign spent about $80,000, but not paying people to get through the petitioning, renting houses, renting cars, paying tolls in Manhattan are outrageous, parking, and printing, because you have to print these stupid petitions and make copies and,
So it was a volunteer kind of effort, and you just managed to get people to help you out. I got a number of signatures for Larry, and a lot of people managed to step up and do some work on Larry's behalf and the group of people that were running for him. What intrigues me is that we came up just a little bit short. Lee Zeldin, guys, like if you're listening, you know I'm about to bash Lee Zeldin right now, okay? That guy couldn't even get 45,000 signatures with a photocopy machine, all right? Like this guy literally copied hundreds of sheets of names over and over again, just collated them in, handed him to the Board of Elections. And guess what, guys? It's not even that illegal. Like, he's not going to get in trouble. The people that did the work for him are not going to get in trouble. Diane's running away because of making
No. My dog just grabbed something horrible out of the garbage and I had to stop it.
So that's very human. My dogs probably will make noise in the background as well. But guys, this is a reality. Lee Zeldin, the man, the myth, the Republican hero, guys, the guys that grade school math was telling everybody he didn't really have a shot, but he was standing up there every day taking your money and telling you that he was going to win. Okay. That guy couldn't get 45,000 signatures to get on an independent line. And Diane Sare, guys, achieved it. And so tell me more. Like, I want to hear, like,
well, that's what was so outrageous about what he did. But what we did is, and look, remember, I worked with LaRouche for 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
We got LaRouche on the ballot in 2000, I guess. It was a long time ago. But we had a handful of veterans from that petitioning campaign who were willing to sort of help guide the process and train people, because we know the state of New York is nasty and they will disqualify signatures for every imaginable reason. You don't put the right town, you don't have the right zip code, you know, all kinds of things. So
did I ever tell you my story? Like, I just want to stretch out your story, so don't lose your train of thought.
Okay.
I petitioned to be a New York State Senator candidate, right? I went out, got the requisite number of signatures. It was substantially easier. I signed my own, witnessed my own petitions. I've been writing on my mailing address, Maryland, New York, for 22 years. I write Maryland, New York on my petition. My petitions were invalidated because I did not write my voting district. I wrote my mailing address. And there was no way around it, man. It was brutal. But okay, so go ahead with yours.
Well, so we had some familiarity with that. And what we did was, I had about 190 people who were out anywhere from 1 to 7 days a week. And I told people, I said, look, this is impossible. So you could never pay people to do this, because what you're going to have to do is insane. You're going to be out on the street 12, 14 hours a day, rain, snow, sleet, shine. We need 2,000 signatures a day on average. You cannot make it up. If we're short, I wanted to have 500 volunteers, because then you would have had a little give, like you could have a messed up day, or you get thrown off the grocery store and you have time to figure it out or whatever. So with 194 volunteers, or 200, let's say, there was no give. Every day had to work. Every squad had to work. We tried to have a standard, and we didn't mostly, but we had the idea that one person per day would get 100 signatures. So a two-man team would get 200 signatures. Okay. That was the gold standard. That's what we tried to do.
And you succeeded, right? Or did you actually exceed that? If I do the
sometimes
math,
it depended what you found to go to. Like, we found various fairs and festivals where you could send a team and you'd come out of it with 600 signatures, and that would be fantastic. Some teams were really low, like you had 30 signatures. The main thing everyone learned is you couldn't give up. You had to fight for every last one. And we had every night a Zoom meeting, every single night, 7 days a week. Yes, where all the people who'd been out that day could get on and talk about what they ran into. We gave a strategic briefing, because I said we are heading toward a nuclear war. We're headed to confrontation with Russia. And that's what we said to people in the field when they said, what does she stand for? They'd say, she doesn't think nuclear war with Russia is a great idea. Oh, okay. I don't, it
amazes me that people aren't more passionate about that. So keep going on this.
Okay. Well, there is some passion about it. Obviously, they signed my petition. At any rate, so then we'd get on, and I'll tell you, like anything that's impossible or anything that's hard to do, your biggest enemy is always yourself. Right. And we had some people who were so good, and they were very modest, or I should say humble, not modest, but humble. So they were willing to share their struggles. Like one guy would get on and just say, I'm having such a hard time with rage. When people say they won't sign, I want to get in a fight. It's really hard for me to just turn and not engage, so we
Yeah.
socialized all of these problems that people were running into. And toward the end, when it became clear that I was going to make it,
Yeah.
we started getting really nasty harassment. People would come up and try to provoke fights with our petitioners. Like they would grab the clipboard out of their hands, throw it on the ground, and then call the manager of the grocery store and say that we were harassing them.
Now, this is to defend Chuck Schumer? I presume. Like, what is there, or was it Republicans that didn't want another person? I would say the Republicans and the conservatives got pretty nasty with the libertarians this year. So I'm just wondering what the.
Well, look, the whole thing is rigged, and I'll tell you what I learned as I began, because I reached out to everybody about this whole situation because it's so unfair, and we say we're in a democratic republic where presumably you want debate. You want the voters to have the opportunity to hear many different opinions and make an informed decision on a candidate. And we're in a great crisis. So you would think that people would be interested in alternative voices or not the same old, same old. And I thought this ballot access thing they did was completely unconstitutional. And so we reached out. At any rate, what I discovered is that the Conservative Party and the Working Families Party and the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are all like this. They're just together.
Thank you for saying that. It's been a constant theme that I've reiterated over and over again. The Conservative Party in New York makes a claim that they're going to pull the Republican Party towards a more conservative existence. Now, as a libertarian, I got here kind of from feeling like I was a conservative, in that conservatives are supposedly wanting a smaller government, a responsible fiscal policy, a strong stance against war unless we're defending ourselves. People's religious freedoms, regardless of what they are important purportedly to conservatives. In New York State, to me, it appears like they rubber stamp everything for the Republican Party, and it's like a shell game. Like they're just saying, yeah, we're going to make XYZ guy slightly more conservative by forcing him to accept conservative votes and give us money. And I'm like, you guys haven't stood for anything in a long time. And so I am very frustrated with the Conservative Party in New York, as you may be getting.
Well, you saw their party line was the exact same line as the Republican Party line, so there was no difference, and the Working Families too. So they pretend that they're an option for people who are fed up with the main parties, but actually they are the main parties. They're just a shadow.
Right. They kind of catch base in people like me who are like, look, Republicans in New York are simply doing the same game as Democrats, like exactly the same game, except they're happy with being in number 2 position because they still get the jobs program. They still get to raise money off of people, and they still get regulations bought from them. Like someone gets to pay them for a regulation to get introduced into the House or the Senate. And so I find that New York State is very frustrating, and I am incredibly frustrated. So again, that lends me to my overwhelming, I'm impressed with your success here.
Well, we just were very determined, and I guess, I'll say this, people trusted me, and therefore they were willing to work hard. And it wasn't for me, it wasn't about me. But I do feel very loyal to people. I'm not going to screw people over or lie or do things like that. So I thought that the relationship between the campaign and all the volunteers was very healthy. And I was very upfront with everyone from the beginning. I said, it's very possible we could do all this work and they're going to find some kind of technicality and they're going to try and throw us off the ballot. Because I didn't want people to get demoralized if something happened. And I can say also with what happened with my votes, I don't know if you saw that amazing disappearing 30,000 votes at the end. But
look, I went to sleep seeing that you had 52,000 votes. in my mind, that's what you got. 55,000 votes. They pulled some chicanery and they wiped some they, I don't know, spilled some ink and then screwed up the computers. Like they played some stupid game so that they made it look. We know this. We know that they're capable of these things. We know it.
Right.
So,
and it probably was high. The one, they finally did do a poll that included my name, which said that I had about 5% of the vote statewide, which would have been very substantial for an independent, and in Rockland County, where I live, when I went to bed, I had 6,212 votes, 5.8% of the vote, corresponding with the poll. By the next morning, it was 277 votes.
Oh my God.
0.2%. Yeah. So, but the whole point of the campaign, it would have been a miracle and a revolution if I had been allowed to come anywhere near beating Chuck Schumer.
Yeah, hang on. Let me interrupt you because we're coming up on what I want to.
Okay.
I want to do a little break for the radio. I do want to get into how you talked to Chuck and you kind of met up with him. And guys, there's some comments coming up that I'm going to be using after the break. If you're checking us out on WYSL, remember Kevin and Tim do the show on Tuesdays. Tim will do interviews with Diane. Kevin will do his shows. Please like, comment, share, and we'll be right back. All right. So we just need a little air break there for a second. And so we can almost go back right when the clock says 22, and then we'll go back for about 10 minutes. Can you see the clock on your end?
Oh, yes. I see it.
In the upper left hand. All right. So when that goes back to 22, we'll get back into the show so we won't really lose our train of thought. This way that if this one gets to the radio, they'll be able to easily put in some commercials. But we'll get to the comments. But first, we'll talk a little bit more about Chuck, then we'll get to the comments. All right.
Okay.
Okay, welcome back to A Free Solution. It's Tim O'Connor, the Freedom Variant, creating a radio show for WYSL and talking to one of my favorite people and guys, I'm a political junkie. I'm crazy for politics, but one of my favorite politicians that kind of stood things on end, Diane Sare. And she's getting ready to do it again. But you did some things like, can we talk about you going and visiting Chuck Schumer right to his face? Like, that was good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah. Well, you see, what happened was he was bragging about this reggae or hip hop group in Staten Island that named him Killer Chuck. And that was the perfect entree for me. So when he said, and they call me Killer Chuck, ha ha ha. And I said, excuse me, you're right. You are a killer. He didn't seem to appreciate that for some reason.
He was so full of himself. Guys, you got to check that out on YouTube. I tried to track down the link to offer it for the show, but guys, you got to check out Diane on YouTube. You got a link of it. She gets tossed out of this event. It was, I just love politics like that, man. It was great. And he was like all full of himself. And guys, look, Chuck Schumer's not a great guy, man. He's not a good dude. He takes government money, throws it around. He's like forcing socialism down everyone's throats. He is a government dependency freak. And he's also kind of like bends the truth a lot. So, and he's an attention hound. And when you got in his face, man, he thought you were going to be like praising him. You could see that. And then he was like, oh man, all right. It was great, Diane. It was.
Well, the other thing he is the intelligence agencies. And that's really why I wanted to go after him, because look, General Flynn, who got fired by Obama because he was with the Defense Intelligence Agency, and he said that he didn't think it was a good policy to be arming Al-Qaeda. Now, I don't think you're going out on a limb on saying that. I think that's obviously true, but our policy was to arm Al-Qaeda, so he was fired. So he had the idea of auditing the intelligence agencies, which Donald Trump agreed with and said he wanted to do that. And that's when Schumer did that famous show with Rachel Maddow. And he said
6 ways to Sunday they did, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He said that would be really stupid because they have 6 ways from Sunday to get back at you. Well, that's what they did through the whole Trump presidency and the raid on Mar-a-Lago. And again, having worked with LaRouche, who was under attack every minute, whose offices were raided, who nearly was assassinated in a 400-person FBI and U.S. Marshal raid on his home. I know what this is.
So you're basically saying the weaponization of the FBI has been an ongoing thing. Lyndon LaRouche this is not new. Now, I heard on the talk radio today that a 22-man team of SWAT guys raided Joe Biden's Rehoboth Beach garage to find that classified information that he parked next to his Corvette. The part that's not true is that the FBI raided it. That is what they did find, though. Like, he's carrying around classified information from when he was vice president. It's just amazing.
Yep. No, and I think these things are a little bit complex. For example, I did get the sense that Biden actually is a little leery about having a nuclear war with Russia. I mean, he did vehemently say we're not going to have boots on the ground in Ukraine and we're not going to fight there. Now we do have boots on the ground in Ukraine. Now we're bringing Ukrainian soldiers here to train them to use the Patriot missile systems, which will take 5 or 6 months minimally, which gives you a sense of how long this war, they intend to have it going on. The Russians don't. The Russians are now deployed to win, because there's no one to negotiate with, and we can talk about that. So let me just, on this Biden point, he is so rotten, and he's so much in the pocket of these intelligence agencies in Wall Street. I would say, well, why would they do this unless they thought he might be an obstacle to some really extreme thing they want to do? Because really, since the Kennedy assassination, and I would argue going back to the death of Franklin Roosevelt, but certainly since the Kennedy assassination, no president has been their own man. They're just not allowed to. They can't. I mean, you saw what happened to Trump when he tried to get our troops out of Syria. What's his face, who was the defense secretary at the time, resigned. And then Bolton flew over to Tel Aviv and countermanded Trump's orders.
Good news. Bolton's going to run for president. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, right. That makes me feel like running for president, I'll tell you. But anyway.
Oh my God. It's just, the news just keeps getting weirder and weirder. And so when he was trying to get our troops out of Syria, a lot of us were kind of like, all right, I was not a huge Trump fan, and I was getting more and more critical of him as it went along, but he did do things that were good, and getting us out of these entanglements, these foreign entanglements where we're risking our children and killing their children, was, in my mind, and pointing out that we fund NATO more than any other country. Like, they just take our money and spend it however they want. These were things that were positive. And then I had to deal with my friends from the left calling him crazy and stupid. And I'm like, aren't you the ones that hate war? Like, what are you guys talking about? We're risking children's lives all the time. And it's the most amazing thing. It's like people are brainwashed or something. I don't know how we're going to.
Well, they are brainwashed. They are brainwashed. And I think less and less of them are, but the news media has created this kind of domain where people become afraid to say what they think.
Not me, not you.
Right. That's
people
true.
Are afraid, and they do. I think people get this thrill of associating with what they perceive to be the winning team, and this notion that now the government is going to punish my enemies and the people that I don't like and don't agree with. And that to me is one of the scariest things about the way our society is. Yes. And I want to call it devolving, but maybe that's not fair. Maybe this has been a longer term thing where we're fighting over these things. But I am really concerned about what I'm seeing. And that's one of the reasons why people like you and people like Larry really appeal to me. We're not doing the same old thing with that. You mind if I go through some of the comments before we hit our next break?
Sure. Go ahead. I'm curious. I can't see them from.
Okay, good. All right. So my buddy Joe is out there. He says he loves when Diane Sare does videos from that house. It's such a nice house. So he's obviously followed some of your other stuff. He has a legit question. And now I'm just going to put this comment up there because I appreciate Joe coming on board. But he's kind of curious. Do you think he voted for you? He's happy that he did. He didn't like the other candidates, but do you think about the fact that you probably can't win? Like that, is that something that let's talk about whether you can win or
Right.
not, how you feel
Okay.
about that. Let's do that.
Well, I don't know that anyone just can win unless we clean up the elections. That's just a huge problem. I should win.
I should win, sure.
And I would intend to fight to win, but unless something is done about the way that things are rigged, then I won't. But I do see it a little maybe differently, because I think the question really is leadership and the American people. Why don't they want independent candidates? Because they don't want the people to have a voice. By tripling the signature requirements, if you took the votes of Larry Sharp, Howie Hawkins, and the other two Serve America and parties, this was over 250,000 votes. And basically the state said, you know what, F you, we don't care about your voice or what you're interested in. Your votes we are not going to have, you will not have an opportunity to be heard.
They literally
Right.
said it in court. That was in their ruling,
Right.
right? We want people that can
Well,
win.
they not only said that, they said we don't want to have people on the ballot that don't agree with the majority of the people. Now, what is that? That is a totalitarian dictatorship, not a free republic. And the value of an independent voice is that things are put on the table where you can hold the candidate accountable and you can force them to answer certain questions, which is why they excluded me so outrageously from the debate.
Of
That
course.
was one of the major outrages. You know, you jump through the hoops, you stand on your head, do 15 pirouettes, and then you get on the ballot with 66,000 signatures, which no one else in the entire state did, including Lee Zeldin. And they say, oh no, you can't be in the debate. She can't be in the debate because she's not a major. There's only 3 candidates for U.S. Senate on the ballot, right? So why was that such a big deal that I couldn't be in the debate? Because I would never have supported, and you heard it, Joe Pinion was almost identical to Schumer on why we have to support Ukraine and have a war with Russia. And then to my surprise, but I forgot, he sold solar panels and windmills or something in a past incarnation. So he said that on the Paris Climate Accords, we should punish countries more harshly that don't go along with them. And I mean, I would never, so had I been in the debate, the whole thing would have been completely different. They would have been back on their heels and freaked out, which would have been very good. So I wasn't allowed to, and they made up a totally arbitrary prerequisite, which is they said you had to have 15% in the polls to be in the debate.
It would have been right. If you had 15%, it would have been 16%. If you had 19%, it would have been 20%.
But here's the thing, it's even more outrageous. So we got the 4 official polling agencies, because I had been called by a couple of my volunteers and said, you know, I got this call from someone asking me who I'm voting for Senate. And when I said Diane Sare, they said, oh, no, you're not allowed to pick that. Choose something else. Schumer opinion. So the 4 polls that they used, not one of them included my name.
That's simply amazing. Look, we're going to kind of take another little break right here. I don't want to lose track of time, and I do want this to work out for the producers of the show. Guys, if you're listening on the Twitters or the Facebooks, remember to like, comment, and share. If you're checking us out on WYSL, check out Larry's show on Tuesday. Check out Kevin's show on Thursday nights. Let's keep this little dream that we've got alive. And Diane and I are going to be right back after these messages. All right, so we'll go right back in at 35 or 34, and let's go 34:30, and we'll go right back at it. We just need a 5-second break, and then we can pick up right where we left off. I'll grab a couple more comments, stuff like that. Then we'll really get into your, what you're doing right now and that sort of thing. All right, welcome back. It's still Tim O'Connor, the Freedom Variant, with one of the most passionate people I've had the pleasure of talking to. It's Diane Sare. We're going on about we're about to get into some of her more like where she aligns with libertarians, this anti-war stuff, this mega uniparty kind of thing. She was just breaking it down for us how they keep her off the debate stage, which we can sympathize with. They tripled the ballot initiative requirements to get on the ballot. They've made it impossible for us to compete because some sort of uniparty system that needs to march lockstep with the World Economic Forum and risk nuclear war with Russia, right, Diane? I mean, isn't that what they're doing?
Yes, and now China. But I think many Americans think that this is an exaggeration. And I have to tell you, it's not. And the driver of it is the fact that the City of London and Wall Street right now, it's now publicly known that they are holding $2 quadrillion worth of derivatives obligations. Quadrillion, 2 quadrillion. Probably more if you take all the offshore and other stuff. So this can never be paid. This is more than the GDP of all the world combined. It's more than the GDP, all the corporate debt, all the credit card debt, all the student loan debt, everything.
The Fed can inflate its way out of it, which will leave the average poor and middle class person with absolutely nothing. I just want to warn everybody about that. That seems to be on the agenda. How would you feel about ending the Fed, Diane?
Oh, absolutely. It's unconstitutional. We should get rid of it. Now, where we may differ is I think we need a national bank. We need a national bank under the Congress because the people have to be represented. And I know people say, oh, the Congress, they're all corrupt. I mean, isn't that why you're running for office?
They are.
Yes.
They are.
But look, take something I'm really pushing right now, which is the files on the JFK assassination.
Right.
Rachel Madcow.
Yeah, Brian LaRusso's out there. Thanks for joining us, Brian. I just want you to know, Diane asked about you specifically. Yeah, Rachel Madcow. Brian is actually very proactive on the local level. He's very impressive.
Yes.
And anytime he joins the show, I want to give him a shout out. And he's a fan of yours, so that's good, right?
Yes, I know he's good. And you guys have pulled off some miracles there, actually.
Right. Brian is the driving force, right? I like to entertain and I like to talk to people. Brian is an aggressive go-getter, and he is trying to, like he said, like when I was talking about conservatives, he's like, Brian says some of us are still true conservatives. That's in line with the Ron Pauls of the world that recognize the corruption in the government, that stand against it, that don't like this megapolis war machine that we're growing. We've got Alice out there, right wing, left wing. It's all one bird, right? Like, doesn't it, from our perspective, this underdog kind of thing, that's where we're at, right?
Well, and that's by design because they don't want us to get together because the people who run this the people holding the $2 quadrillion of derivatives obligations have an interest in keeping, look, they say the world's overpopulated. They want to get rid of 7 billion out of 8 billion people. Well, if you want to do that, you better make sure that the 7 billion don't get together. You better make sure there's a million different splinter wedge issues. So fundamental things like, are we going to have enough food? Are we going to have enough energy? Will we have water management? Are we going to just have floods and droughts and lose our entire food supply? Are we going to have clean water? You know, these are things that are not partisan issues.
The Malthusians are meeting this weekend in Davos once again to discuss exactly these issues, to fly in on their Learjets, their private jets, and to, rub elbows with each other and discuss what the best strategies forward are to lower the population, to slow they're going to say right now they're going to do their best to slow population growth. But what they really are doing, right, is they've got to be thinking, because they are Malthusians in their mindset and in their actions. They want less people on the planet for them and theirs.
Right. And all the hardship that people are suffering, they blame on Russia, which had nothing to do with it, who did not cause it, this whole thing. So because they can't pay these derivatives obligations, they can't be met. A war would be very convenient because in a big war, you get to write off your debt if you're alive. And the problem is we have some really psychotic people like Dr. Strangelove
Yeah.
who think that you can win a nuclear war, or they don't realize, as Scott Ritter, who I've been working with a lot lately, who is a former weapons inspector in when it was the Soviet Union, he was looking, he knows what the Russians have, he knows what the US has. And he said, and another expert I've been collaborating with, who's a nuclear war expert, they just said, look, the Russians are 20 years ahead of us. They have hypersonic missiles that we are not anywhere close to having. So when Biden says these crazy things like, we're going to do a disarming strike against Russia, Russia has been very clear. Their nuclear doctrine is no first strike, no first use. It's in writing. They will only use nuclear weapons either if they're fired on first or there is an existential threat to Russia. The US has an ambiguous policy. Well, we might do. So the US is sort of in a position to blackmail everyone through nuclear terror. Russia's point was they have all these missiles and nuclear weapons for deterrence. That is, don't strike us because the world will end, right? If you tell Russia, and this is the problem with putting nuclear weapons on Russia's border, if you're only 3 minutes away from knocking out their missile silos as opposed to 30 minutes away, they might not be able to use their deterrent because they couldn't get their second strike out. And so when Biden says we're going to launch a what did I say? Disarming strike.
Disarming strike. So what are they going to EMP the entire Russian
supposedly
nuclear arsenal?
Yeah, and this is frankly BS.
Yeah,
because we don't have the capability to do it, although Russia could do that to us. So what Putin said on December 9th is he said, we had a no first use doctrine, but if you're planning to eliminate our ability to respond, we may have to change our doctrine to say that we will strike first, because if you're telling us we're not going to be able to strike second, then what choice does that leave us? And then Medvedev, who was the former president of Russia, who is now, I think, the head or deputy head of their National Security Council, he put up a note on Telegram announcing that Russia has sent submarines armed with Zircon hypersonic missiles to within 100 miles of the coast of every NATO country that has a coastline, including Washington, D.C.
I think that what when we were little, right, we used to talk about nuclear war. Our teachers used to teach us about it, and we used to discuss it. So it was a very real threat that we understood meant basically annihilation of life as we know it. I don't think that this generation has a sense of that. No. And I think that people that are in love with the government, that are literally worshiping at the Malthusian altar, if you will, or the government, first altar, they really believe these things, that there is going to be a winner in a nuclear war. And I just, regardless of whether the scenario plays out exactly as doomsday as you're saying, or whether it will never be a positive thing to have nuclear missiles exploding all over the planet. It's not going to be. A lot of people.
No, and it's right. It's not only nuclear. I am also afraid of bioweapons and chemical weapons. We know there's a lot of that in Ukraine. We know the U.S. was doing a lot of very nasty stuff there because it's illegal to do it in the U.S. So you farm it out to other countries. And in fact, I was just reading an article about, you might remember when the Ukrainians blew up a prison which had a whole bunch of their own prisoners of war in it.
I thought Russia did that.
They tried to blame Russia, but Ukraine did it because the Russians were doing blood tests on the prisoners of war, and they were discovering all of these peculiar things. One, West Nile virus, things that were being tested out in the laboratories that Victoria Nuland admitted they were there. and high levels of antibiotics because they've been testing these viruses. I mean, we care so much about those Ukrainian soldiers. We're willing to use them for guinea pigs and infect them with all kinds of things. And now we're just having them be totally slaughtered because there's no way they're going to beat Russia. So Ukraine is losing 10 people to every one that Russia is losing.
Follow that. That's one of the most appealing pieces of how you discuss this to people. Like, what are the odds that Ukraine can, in a boots on the ground kind of war, actually take on Russia?
What are the odds that the Mexican drug cartels could beat the United States?
I would say honestly, sometimes they seem pretty effective, the Mexican drug cartels. They are experts at moving product through interesting ways that are
But if we went to war, if we had a war with Mexico,
who would win? Right. Okay.
And what kind of person would tell the Mexicans, look, you just keep fighting. You guys just keep fighting. You're going to win. We know you're going to win. We'll give you all the weapons. No, we won't give you those weapons, but we'll give you 30-year-old weapons that don't really work. And you just keep fighting.
And we'll grow our economy by giving you our old weapons. Like, guys, that's a big number of the economic success story that is the Biden administration, is offloading some of our incredibly old weapons to the Ukraine. It's very from an economic standpoint.
Right. And we're totally broken down. I mean, look, I just have to say, I forget is it Raytheon? Brian would probably know, whichever company it is that produces the Stinger missiles.
Raytheon is the greenest bomb maker in the world. Diane.
Raytheon? Okay.
You should see their tweets. They are very proud of their green initiatives.
Well, I guess they weren't involved in blowing up the Nord Stream pipelines then, because that sure let a lot of methane into the air. But at any rate, it took us 6 years to produce the Stinger missiles that were used up or sold in Ukraine in 10 months. And I say sold because there's an incredible black market. The Nigerians are complaining that their Boko Haram is getting all these weapons.
Yeah. Well, there's been rumors that Ukraine is getting these things and then reselling them for money. Like that's
no, they are.
Stories we see. It's not proven. Like I'm saying it without any source at all, guys. And maybe I'm just kidding. Like it's a joke. The show is like humor based sometimes. Shelley, I love that comment, Shelley. I wanted to put it up there for a few minutes. People who vote for whoever they've been told is most popular represent an airhead populace. I do think that libertarians, independents, they do offer a little bit more thought to this dystopian kind of thing that we're seeing here. This Russia, Ukraine, us going all in and telling Ukraine fight. You make that point so well. I just now you have coming up, right? Tomorrow? Are you all right? So I'm going to do a screenshot, and Diane's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on here. This is tomorrow in New York City, guys.
Yes, it's actually the Young Americans for Liberty. That's Young Libertarians, isn't it?
Well, they are libertarian adjacent, I would say. They help. I would say they're a little Machiavellian in that they do kind of reach out to whoever has the most money first and offer to help them. So they do a lot of work with Republicans. They are willing to help libertarians, but there's a lot of young people that do a lot of volunteer great work, but there's also there's an interest there, if you follow what I'm saying. But they are great. They do speak well on issues of liberty, and this is fantastic.
Yeah, well, actually, both Larry Sharp and I will be speaking at this rally tomorrow.
Oh my God, that's great. I didn't know Larry was going to be there too. That's fantastic.
Yes, he's going to be there as well. And it's a rally and a march over, as you can see, near the United Nations. So I think it will be good. And people who are in the New York City area, you should participate. Or even if you're not, you should get in a car and drive down and join us. We've got to get in the streets. We got to do something here.
I agree with getting in the streets, but here's my thing. I've been working down on Long Island, so I have to drive through New York City, and that's really as close to New York City as I want to be. Like that driving through it. I see it there on my right-hand side as I'm driving down the Spring Parkway to head out to 495, and I'm like, Yeah, that can stay right there. That's fine. I'm a country boy, Diane. I'm not gonna lie. Like I live out in the middle of nowhere on a lake. You know, I have a lot of neighbors. They're very close. It's a little bit overpopulated, but it's still a community. It's still a small thing. You know, it's like
Right.
I like that. So, but I am excited that you're going to be doing this. You're going to be speaking at this tomorrow. Larry's going to be speaking at this tomorrow.
Yeah.
Who else do we got? Is Chuck Schumer going to show up?
No,
I
no,
didn't think so.
I don't think so.
Kirsten Gillibrand.
I doubt it. I doubt it.
Look, we're running out of time. Do you have any shots that you want to take at Kirsten Gillibrand before we go?
Well, she's Ms. Crypto.
Yeah.
She is involved in this scheme. They're using the Sam Bankman, or I call him Sam Bankrupt Fried.
Yeah, that's him.
He's sort of a patsy. I mean, he's a 27-year-old brat who set up this thing so they can now call for regulating crypto. Now, I don't support crypto. I think it's all a scam in the first place because you can't have anything online that's not ultimately run by the NSA and the people who know everything that's going on online.
You know, that's an interesting point. That scares me. Now I'm going to go sell all my cryptocurrency. I was believing in it right up until this moment. But okay, go ahead.
All
Sorry.
right. Well, it is sort of a scam, which they can pull the plug on whenever they want. But they really want to have it in the New York Federal Reserve and really ultimately globally. I mean, you remember during the pandemic, they were talking about giving people electronic bank accounts. And then they were going to control what you were allowed to spend your money on. So you could spend it on this, but you couldn't spend it on that. And ultimately, of course, then they would have an enormous amount of control over you. So Gillibrand is involved in the committee that wants to do these new crypto regulations, which really are a farce. I mean, look, we are going to hell. I think people know that. I mean,
here's the issue, Diane. We can continue this conversation and people can join us on our Facebook lives that we're going to do in the future and this one later. But right now, unfortunately, due to time constraints, we have to start finishing this show up. But again, people are free to join us. People are free to follow you at your Diane for U.S. Senate page on Facebook. You have things on the internet. All you got to do is look up her name. She's everywhere. She has a YouTube channel. And once again, this is Tim O'Connor, the Freedom Variant, a free solution. Thank you all for joining us. So we can carry on, though. You can, don't let that's just for the radio. Please.
Go soon, because I actually have to get up really early so I can get to that rally on time.
That makes sense.
From up here. But let me just say one thing, because the people who are on Facebook, you have to get to your representative and tell them to stop funding Ukraine. That's the only thing that's going to end this. I had a really incredible program on Sunday, and both Scott Ritter and then this Russian who was on said they don't hold faith in any negotiations because the West has demonstrated that they're liars. And how do you negotiate with anyone who lies? You really can't. Although I have signed something initiated by Helga Zepp-LaRouche basically calling on people to support the Vatican's initiative to host negotiations, because the Vatican is the only, well, what they've said is unconditional. You can't get negotiations if you're going to blame everything on one side or the other, or particularly Russia, right? You have to give respect to, and the Vatican has played a role. And in fact, I wasn't even aware. Did you know they're involved in some of the prisoner exchanges? So I didn't know that.
They get involved in a lot of these peace initiatives, and that's good, right? That's a very valuable function for them to be participating in. I think it's
no, and also Biden claims to be Catholic. I don't see very much Christian about him, but at any rate, he claims it. So this is very important, but really in the U.S., we have to stop the funding. And the Russian who was on, who's a very high-level scientist, actually, he said, look, cut off the money to Ukraine, the war will be over in 3 days.
Like, that's obvious, right? Like, that's a literal reality where the argument that we're funding Ukraine to help disrupt Russia's hegemony in the area, it is a logical conclusion from our actions here that we are trying to disrupt Russian influence. And I get it. Like, I don't think that Russia is always a good actor, right? Like they certainly are up to their scheming and things like that. I don't think that there's a hero here. I certainly don't feel like our aggression and our funding of wars is in any way heroic either. So
No, although I will tell you, I actually think that the Russians are heroic in this one.
That's
I-
fine. We
I
can
do.
disagree about that. And you please
Really-
feel free to make your point.
Yeah, no, they gave every opportunity for they didn't intend to do this.
Right.
And what Merkel and Francois Hollande now admit is they were lying during the Minsk Accords. We overthrew the Obama-Biden administration with $5 billion from the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, which is the CIA, overthrew the Ukrainian government and put a bunch of Nazis in power, people who support Stepan Bandera, the swastika. I mean, literal
Right.
Nazis.
We got to be careful with that one on Facebook, right? Like,
Oh, yeah, right.
So,
So they started killing people and torturing people like Zelensky is now doing. He's rounding up priests and torturing them. He just stripped 13 Ukrainian Orthodox priests of their citizenship.
It's an amazing time when the government is once again confronting religion on a level that we haven't seen, for 2 or 3 generations, right? Like this.
And I agree with what Joseph Farina is saying right there. Yes, absolutely. He would be excommunicated.
A lot of people that said like the Kennedys, the Cuomos, all of them would be excommunicated, even as recently as 30 years ago, 25 years ago, that the church would have made a big stink and a big stand on some of their political positions. That's an absolute reality. Guys, I am going to be doing something with Larry Sharp on Monday night at 9:00. I hope you all check it out. Diane, I want to say thank you for your time. I admire your effort. I admire your passion. I wish you the best of luck, and I hope you come back and do the show with me again, and we kind of count progress here. We see how we're doing.
Great.
And then I hope we figure out a way around these onerous ballot systems that we've got. I know it's $300 or 50 signatures and you're on the ballot, like for whatever office you want. So that's looks like democracy to me. This looks like uniparty Orwellian nonsense. And let's not forget that in 2024, these guys get $100 million of taxpayer money to back their plays. Like this is, no wonder people are fleeing the state. I'm going to fight for a little while longer, at least until my kid's out of high school. And if Diane gets elected or Larry gets elected, or by some miracle I decide to run again and I make a huge impact, right? Like that's a possibility. But I'm frustrated, I'm scared, and I'm getting old. Like I can just go live someplace else and say, see you later, kids. Good luck. That's a mess.
If we can live.
Join Diane tomorrow at the anti-war protest at the United Nations building, 10 a.m., January 13th, 2023. I hope it goes really well. Maybe you'll post some updates or something like that. And thanks for all the comments, Shelly, Brian, Joe. I'm sure there's Alice, Brian Hoyt's out there. Guys, thank you very much. We'll see you Tuesday, maybe Monday when I'm with Larry. Anyways, Diane, thank you very much for everything that you've done, and good luck.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Welcome. Yep. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.